Paul Taylor, welcome.
Nice to be here.
Tell me about Ida Mae Fuller.
Ida Mae Fuller was a never-married legal secretary from Brattleboro, Vermont. She was the first person ever to receive a Social Security check in her retirement, 1940, just after her 65th birthday. The check bore the number 00001, and it was a monthly check for a little over $22. Ida was clever enough to live for another 35 years. She died at age 100. In the course of those 35 years, those checks kept coming, and at the end, she had received something about $23,000 over the course of her retirement. Doesn't sound like much in today's dollars. But if you then look at what Ida had put into the system, when she retired, was only 3 years old. She had only contributed for 3 years. And so you added what she put in and what her employer put in. Ida got back a return on those investments, if you will, those contributions, of 500-fold. She is the poster girl for a demographic reality about Social Security that's very current today, which is that the system was absolutely at its best for the first generation. It was very good for the next generation, and on it goes. But by the time we fast forward to 2014, it is in big demographic trouble, because way back then, we had 30, 40, 50, even 150 workers per retiree literally at first. It goes down precipitously, and it gets to 10 to 1, it gets to 5 to 1, and by the time all of today's 65-year-olds, the famous baby boom generation, who are crossing the threshold of age 65 at the rate of 10,000 a day, and will do so every day between now and 2030, when we get to the end of that, we have just 2 workers for every retiree. And the math that Franklin Delano Roosevelt put in place 75 years ago doesn't work anymore. And unfortunately, we have today's young adults, the so-called millennial generation, who are having a lot of trouble getting started in life because they've come of age in a very hostile economy. They are paying money into a system to support a level of benefits for today's retirees that they have no realistic chance of getting when they themselves retire. So there needs to be a rebalancing of the social compact. It's a very important challenge. It's a very difficult challenge for this country politically, because not only is Social Security and Medicare half of our budget, or about to become half of our budget, it's by far the biggest thing we do, but it is symbolically the purest statement in public policy that as a country, we are a community all in this together. These are programs that affect everybody. And the old math of these programs doesn't work. And if you start from Ida and you come to today, it's a pretty dramatic change.
So Ida got a lot more money than she put into the system. Today's baby boomers, what's it like for them?
Well, it depends on if you look at Social Security alone or Social Security and Medicare. Medicare is added in 1965 by LBJ. If you add those two together, for most of today's baby boomers, they still come out ahead. They don't get nearly the windfall returns that the first generation did, but they still get out ahead. I concoct a prototypical baby boomer who retires in 2014. I call her Jane Smith. I say, look, if she lives her actuarially allotted 20 additional years in good health, she will get roughly $500,000 in benefits from Social Security and Medicare. And of that, she and her employers over her working life, and again, she's the median, she's the typical, will have paid maybe about $380,000, and the remainder of that is going to be picked up by today's and tomorrow's taxpayers. But the trouble is, if you fast forward not to today's 65-year-olds, but to today's 45-year-olds or to today's 25-year-olds, they are almost all of them in negative territory. They will pay more in over the course of their lifetimes than they will get back.
So at its heart, your book is about this generational tension that's being caused by specifically this question on entitlements. Tell us a little bit about the 4 American generations currently bouncing around our country.
Sure. You know, what I would say about what the book is about, I didn't start out to write a book about generational equity. I started out to write a book about demographic, social, and political change. I work at the Pew Research Center. That's what we do. We do a lot of public opinion survey research. We have a lot of demographers, political scientists, other social scientists, economists, and we sort of look at trends again, political, social, economic, and we look at them through lots of lenses. But over the decade that I've been working there, looking at them through the generational lens is quite fascinating, because we are in an era where the generation gaps seem unusually large. America has always had its generation gaps because America is a very dynamic society, and we always have younger adults who see the world differently from their parents and their grandparents. But in this particular moment, these gaps across all dimensions that we're interested in have gotten very wide. The largest of those gaps is racial and ethnic. We are now 40 or 50 years into the third great immigration wave in our country's history. It began in the mid-60s when we passed legislation to open the borders, having closed our borders back in the 1920s in reaction to the previous immigration wave. And the borders sort of stayed closed through world wars and depressions, et cetera. We were ready to open them up again. What's distinctive about the modern immigration wave, first of all, in absolute numbers, more immigrants than the two previous waves put together, although as a share of the population still not as big. But what's really distinctive is our first two immigration waves, going back to the late 19th and early 20th century, 9 and 10 of our immigrants were from Europe. In this wave, half are from Latin America, nearly 30% are from Asia, only about 10% are from Europe. So this wave is changing our racial complexion and makeup. And we are now a country that is on a path to become majority non-white before the middle of this century, sometime in the early 2040s, according to the Census Bureau. Pretty dramatic change. So for someone my age, and I'm actually one of those boomers who's about to turn 65 this year, so I'm born into a country that's 85% white, and I'm going to be looking at a country soon that's 43% white. It is, for people my age, it is disorienting. For people my children's and grandchildren's age, it's the only America they've known, and it's the most natural thing in the world. This plays out in lots of ways. I start the book with a aha moment on the night of President Obama's re-election victory in 2012. I'm an old political reporter. I'm sort of interested in what's going to happen with election outcomes, and I used to have a bad habit of trying to forecast them. And as I write, I'm about as reliable as a coin flip. I was really struck on election night by the number of really smart conservative and Republican political analysts, pollsters, commentators who were flummoxed by the outcome, who really expected Mitt Romney to win that election. And they had a lot of reason to expect that. We had been in 4 years of a terrible economy, unemployment rates 8, 9, 10%. And yet Obama not only won, he actually won pretty easily. He won by 5 million votes. And the opening pages of the book sort of capture the commentary of the Rush Limbaughs, who says the white establishment is no longer a majority, and Bill O'Reilly were outnumbered. This was a moment, I think, where at least one of our great political parties realized, whoops, the country that we thought we were running in, that we thought we were going to win in, isn't the country that came out and voted that day. Mitt Romney wound up getting just 17% of the non-white vote. That doesn't augur well for a major political party looking at the future change of the country. Now, you asked about the generation. So if you sort of play this out generationally, if you start from the oldest generation, they're the whitest generation. They're the most conservative generation politically, and they're the so-called silent generation. They came of age in the 40s and 50s. They've been conservative much of their lives. Financially, they are actually our most secure generation, and a lot of the upheavals of the Great Recession of the 5-8 years ago, they were mostly able to escape. Most of them have paid off the mortgages on their homes, so all that foreclosure and going underwater didn't affect them that much. Many, if not most of them, were already retired. They didn't have jobs to lose. But nonetheless, they're very anxious. Frankly, about the changing complexion of the country. They're somewhat disoriented, I think, by the digital revolution and the new ways that people communicate. The next oldest generation are the boomers. They're in their 50s and 60s. The oldest of them is probably now 67. So they're on the cusp of retirement. They were a famous generation, my generation, famous generation back in the 60s when they were the leaders of the counterculture,